This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
It was September 11th, 1777, and the moment that 42-year-old Elizabeth Drinker had been dreading was finally arrived. Elizabeth's husband, Henry, her senior by 1 year and a prosperous Quaker merchant, was among 30 men who had been arrested a week before on suspicion of treason. Pennsylvania's patriot government had brought no formal or specific charges against these individuals, but most were Quaker pacifists who refused to fight with or otherwise support either side in the War for Independence. The prisoners, locked up in a makeshift prison at the Masonic Lodge in Philadelphia, had written several letters of protest, denouncing their treatment and demanding a formal hearing. The Supreme Executive Council had informed them in turn that they must swear allegiance to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as a free and independent state, or suffer the consequences. Only a third of the prisoners took the oath and secured their freedom. 20 remained in prison, 19 of them Quakers. Their families and friends, outraged by what Elizabeth called the tyrannical conduct of the present wicked rulers, visited them daily, waiting anxiously to see what would happen next. The revolutionary government had decided to send the prisoners to Virginia as exiles, with their ultimate fate uncertain. Most of the detainees were men of property, and the council had promised that they would be allowed to depart in their own carriages, as befitted gentlemen. But that promise was now broken, and they were to leave instead in wagons commandeered for the occasion. The moment of departure turned out to be emotionally fraught and violent. Sarah Fisher, wife of prisoner Thomas Fisher, recorded in her diary that the prisoners were dragged outside into the wagons by force and then drove off surrounded by guards and a mob. Yet not all of those who gathered to watch were hostile to the 20 men. When the time came for the prisoners' removal, wrote Thomas Gilpin, another of the exiles, the surrounding streets were crowded by men, women, and children, who by their countenances sufficiently, though silently, expressed the grief they felt on the occasion. As wagons carried the exiles away, torn from their loved ones, gunfire resounded in the distance. Elizabeth noted in her diary that the town was in great confusion that day. Patriot soldiers were fighting a few miles distant at the Battle of Brandywine to halt the British advance toward Philadelphia, and now her husband had disappeared into a war-ravaged landscape from which he might never reemerge. Elizabeth could not find the words to describe the prisoner's departure, but she wrote that night that afterwards she had gone in great distress to a friend's house before returning to her own home and her 5 small children. Over the coming days, she would assure Henry in a series of loving, anxious letters that he was much talked of and much felt for. In the meantime, Elizabeth faced an uncertain future as she assumed responsibility for protecting their home and young family against the horrors of war in a city held first by the Patriots, then by the British, and then again by the Patriots. By the time that Henry and the other prisoners returned 8 months later, amid growing controversy over their treatment, at no point formally charged with any crime, 2 of the exiles had died, and Henry himself had endured serious illness. The cruel separation had proven a harrowing ordeal for him, Elizabeth, and their entire family. The fate of the Quaker community remained in peril throughout the War for Independence. Most Quakers, including Henry Drinker, condemned the British policies that led to protest, rebellion, and ultimately revolution. Yet Friends, as Quakers called themselves, were reluctant to reject outright the Crown's authority, in part because the monarchy had defended them for many decades against persecution, but also, and crucially, because of their commitment to pacifism and to reform over revolution. 18th-century Quakers believed that subjects had the right and duty to resist unjust policies through peaceful protest, but should not seek to overthrow any government that God had placed over them. Quakers envisaged that constitutional change would take place gradually over time, as people developed a clearer sense of what was right and sought to create just governments through debate, negotiation, and, when necessary, protest. Their insistence that change should occur through an ongoing process of peaceable reform, not violence or revolution, made them anathema to patriots who now wanted a complete break from Britain and what they saw as its hopelessly corrupt, oppressive system of government. The outbreak of war made Quaker pacifism even more aggravating for patriots facing the might of the British Army. When most friends adopted a position of principled neutrality, patriots doubted their sincerity and accused them of having secret Loyalist sympathies, thus the wave of arrests.